In this video, I'm going to be announcing my brand new two-stroke bike project. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the channel, guys. For you returning viewers, for those of you who are new, my name is Greg Hitchko. To give you guys a little background history, I've done a few bike builds over the past few years. Here's my 2007 KX250, and then I decided to upgrade from that bike to do what I called my throwback two-stroke garage build shootout, which I took all of the last gen two-strokes, the CR250, YZ250, KX250, and RM250, and completely rebuilt those bikes from the ground up and did a couple of shootout style videos like you'd see in a magazine, like for example Swap Moto Live, Vital MX, Racer X, etc. But now I'm on to my 1999 KX250 that you see here, and we're going to be tearing this thing down in this video today. So I'm going to be straight up with you guys. This was not in the plan. I was not planning on doing a bike project at all. Well, especially not with this bike anyway. I told myself when I bought this 1999 KX250, I'm just going to ride it. I'm going to make a few adjustments to it, make sure it's rideable so I don't have a bike in pieces during the summer, so I can just go out and have some fun and then have another project bike to build. Well, that idea ended real shortly. I got bit by this bug that I never knew existed before, and I'm calling it the era-specific factory part bug. And a month after buying this bike, I started buying more parts for this bike that I didn't even know that I wanted to buy. And that is what this project is going to be all about. And with that being said, fortunately for you guys, this bike is going to turn out epic and it's going to be truly one of a kind. But unfortunately for me, I'm going to be digging pretty deep into my pockets for this one. This is something I've never done before. All of my builds prior are what I call budget builds. I like to take everything and refurb everything and save as much as I can from the prior version or the old version of the bike and use it on my new bike build. So my prior builds weren't complete from the ground up, new bolts, bearings, etc. I salvaged what I could use for the new build to save myself some money. And if you guys are in this bike build world or interested in doing something like a bike build for yourself, that is what I highly suggest starting out with. Taking your bike, tearing it down, cleaning as many parts as you can, refurbing and saving what you can, and then use it on the new bike. Ultimately, it's going to save you a ton of money down the road, especially if you're the one doing the work on the bike. But with this bike, I'm blowing my budget way out of the water, and I'm going to be working with another media outlet as well in the industry. And while I'm pumping out new videos for this bike, if you guys are not familiar with the origin of the 1999 KX250, I highly suggest you going back into my channel. But long story short, barn find, the thing was in immaculate condition, pretty much all bone stock except for the handlebars and I think the rear sprocket. What I did, I stripped it down just enough to grease all the bearings to make sure it was all working in order. Like I said, I was just gonna ride this bike. I had no plans on stripping it down and turning it into what I'm about to share with you guys right now. But as you see, I threw the purple Renthal bars on it. I've got a Pro Circuit bar clamp, and I've got triple clamp, Pro Circuit triple clamps for the bike, which you guys are gonna see in a little bit, that are gonna match the theme of what I'm going for here. I went with the tall, firm Guts Racing seat foam and all purple seat cover to make this bike feel like a little bit more of a modern bike. I threw the JSV cone pipe exhaust on it and then the primary drive chain and sprockets. But the idea with this was to just kind of keep it simple, go with the 90s purple Kawasaki theme. And it's always going to be something that I can easily swap back to when I get bored with this next current look. But let's cut to the chase. I'm done talking about what this bike looks like currently behind me. I want to turn it into what it's going to be in the future, which is going to be a 1999 Pro Circuit Kawasaki Splitfire themed bike. Now, it's not going to be a 100% replica bike. I know many of you guys out there take the replica term pretty seriously, and this is not going to be a replica. But like I've said, with this bike, it's going to house a ton of era-specific Pro Circuit parts on it that I've collected for the past almost year now. And I'm pretty excited to share with you guys what those are because one, they're super rare. Two, I'm not excited about how expensive they were, but ultimately they're gonna make this thing one pretty unique, bad arse looking bike. What's gonna be pretty awesome too throughout the project and at the end of it, I decided to take it one step further too. And what I did was reach out to David Pingree at Whiskey Throttle Media you guys know he's a huge two-stroke guy. I reached out to him to see if he would want to feature the bike for the Whiskey Throttle media channel. And at the end of the project, he is ultimately going to be swinging a leg over the 1999 Splitfire bike that I'm going to be building, testing it for his channel, doing a video for Whiskey Throttle, and throughout the whole process, I'm going to be doing these highlight videos of my build series on his Whiskey Throttle media channel as well. So it's going to be awesome. You guys are going to be getting hit from content with my channel as well as the Whiskey Throttle media channel. And hopefully you guys are excited to have Ping test the bike at the end of the project, because he knows how to rip a two-stroke and he knows how to make the thing sing. But before I start tearing this thing down behind me, how about I show you guys some of the era-specific Pro Circuit parts that I've collected along the past year that's going to make this build super sweet. Okay, so these are some of the parts that we're going to be working with that I've collected so far that you see on the table here. From left to right, we'll work it. So the suspension that we're going to be working with, these are actually Pro Circuit Works forks and shock that used to be Victor Sheldon's back in the day. And as you see here, they kind of had the coveted blue top caps. Next up is the seat cover. Now this is probably one of the hardest things to find if you're kind of doing one of these Splitfire Pro Circuit bikes. This seat cover is an actual seat cover from a Pro Circuit bike back in the day. And it's not just from any old Pro Circuit bike. The word behind this seat cover is that it was actually on Ricky Carmichael's practice bike way back in the day. So that is really cool to have a seat cover like this. The stripes are kind of a little bit faded on it, but if you guys have any clue about searching for parts on bikes like this yourself, you know how hard something like this is to find. Next up, we have a set of NOS new old stock that have never been opened Pro Circuit linkage pull rods. Next, you see a Pro Circuit ignition cover. These, the Pro Circuit ignition cover and clutch cover are super hard to find. I've got a PK 99 250 Pro Circuit Works pipe that you see there, and then I picked up a silencer off of eBay that has a little stinger tip, so I'm going to be refurbing those. And if you guys saw my last pipe video, I'm going to be using that same process to bring these things back to life. With the current bike I have now, you guys saw that I have the Pro Circuit bar clamps, and they are actually oversized, and I had to use those to put the oversized 1 1/8 Renthal twin wall purple bars on there, and there are just the Pro Circuit triple clamps that I have for the bike that I'm going to be throwing on. And then finally here in this picture, I've got a set of Pro Circuit foot pegs, which just helps make the bike as well. And then we got another eBay find here with these clutch and brake levers. I was able to score these NOS Pro Circuit levers for pretty cheap actually on eBay, which I was stoked. And then what you also don't see here that I've got still in the process of being shipped are these Pro Circuit axle blocks and clutch perch. All of these parts here, the triple clamps, the Pro Circuit ignition, the linkage, the suspension, the pipe, the axle blocks, the clutch perch, those are super rare Pro Circuit parts that they used to make that you could just buy them from the Pro Circuit catalog, but since these bikes have kind of gone extinct, but now that everybody's resurrecting them, they're just really hard to find. And if you're one of these people who have these parts, you're really not selling them because you know how rare and how much they go for. So they're kind of collector's pieces. Okay, but it is time to get this thing down to the frame, guys, because I've got something else coming. Carbon fiber parts coming from Australia, which I haven't mentioned yet. That's why I need to get this thing stripped down. We're getting the frame powder coated flow green, the exact same color that Pro Circuit used back in the day. And we've got the carbon fiber glide plate underneath, and then the water pump guard along with the airbox streamliners and the carbon fiber mud flat piece. These are the pieces that Pro Circuit used on their bikes, so it's going to be awesome that this bike is going to have it. But we need to get the frame actually stripped of its current powder coat first, because what I need to do is then send the frame to my guy in California. I'm going to have him reinforce the welds just like the Kawasaki team did back in the day, and then weld gussets on the bottom and side of the frame for the glide plate as well as that water pump guard. So it will be like a factory Kawasaki frame, and you won't need those little hangers like some other companies use to mount the skid plate on these bikes. So the first first thing that 99% of the people start with when tearing down their bike has got to be the seat. I don't know who else starts with any other piece of the bike when they start to tear it down, but the purple gut seat is out. We're gonna be swapping it out for this 1999 KX125 seat cover that was said to be on Carmichael's bike. This is gonna be more of a showpiece for the bike rather than what I'm going to use. So let me toss that to the side right now. I still have the stock OEM seat that is in phenomenal condition, and what I think I might do with this, guys, is actually rip the OEM seat cover off of it. I know I said I wasn't gonna do it. I was gonna preserve the seat as is, but I just don't ever see myself using this seat ever again. One, because it's so dang slippery, and that's why the gut seat cover works so well, because it keeps you planted in place. But what I think I'm gonna do is rip this seat cover off and maybe hang it on the wall or something and throw that Pro Circuit seat cover on this, and just kind of keep this as the showpiece. And then this will be the seat that Pingree will ride as well on the bike, because I also scored another 1999 KX125 250 seat, and Guts is going to be sending me over tall seat foam. Then I'm also going to go with an all black gripper seat for the bike that I'm going to use on a regular basis. Actually, what I might do is see if I can recreate these Kawasaki Team Pro Circuit badges on the side here, and then stitch that to the gut seat cover, the one that is for me. So I might see if I can do that. If I can do that, I'll keep you guys posted and see, tell you guys where I source those from. But what's awesome, guys, I've been working with Andy and the team at Guts for quite a few years now, and he's outfitted all my bikes with Guts seat foam and seat covers. What we ended up doing is formulating up a discount code for you guys. So if you guys use the code GH20 at Guts Racing, you can get seat foam, seats, complete seats, whatever you guys need. You guys are gonna get a 20% discount at Guts. Actually, Pro Circuit uses Guts Racing seat foams, and they have been for the longest time. So it just kind of makes sense to use Guts for this bike. And whether you want to believe it or not, these gripper seat covers make the hugest difference. I made a video about this purple one actually, and I'll leave that in my description below. So Houston, we've got our first problem, and not the problem that I was expecting to have. Super annoying. So these KX250s are notorious for the bolts seizing in the gas tank nuts here, and I just so happened to have one of those Kawasaki's. Now, I'm a little upset because at myself, totally my fault. I knew about this. I should have put some anti-seize on these bolts the last time I put them in, but I was like, it's not gonna happen to me. Well, guess what? It happened to me during this project, which is great. So now I can teach you guys how to take this out. It's one of those things that is supposed to take 10 seconds that takes so much longer and frustrates the shiz out of you, but it happens when we're working on these old dirt bikes. That's what we get ourselves into. We just got to get it out now. So what we're going to do here to remove this bolt from the gas tank nut is actually I'm going to throw the 8mm socket onto the drill, and then I'm going to spin the crap out of this to build heat within the tank. And what's going to happen is that plastic on the tank is going to melt just enough where I'll be able to pry the bolt and that gas tank nut out. Once I've got the nut and bolt out, I'm going to put the nut in the vise, take the bolt off, rework the threads a little bit, make sure they're still good, and then what we're going to do is throw a little bit of epoxy back on that nut and epoxy the nut back into the tank. Which brings me to my next point, so we don't have that problem again. Every single bolt on this bike is getting thrown out. Figuratively, not literally, because Spec Bolt put together a nickel restoration kit specifically for this model. So every single bolt that you see on this bike, from the front caliper to the rear caliper, triple clamps, engine bolts, every bolt on this bike. I even sent them the lengths of my Pro Circuit triple clamps because the bolts are a little bit different from the OEM bolts lengthwise. You guys know me as the one to refurb all my bolts using the Prime MX wheels. I decided to step up the game way more with this bike, and the bolts especially are gonna be looking so good on the engine and just throughout the bike in general. So if you guys have an old bike like this, let me get you a bolt for example. And the bolts are just looking super corroded like this. You can kind of see the white corrosion on it. Really nasty on there. So to give you guys a little bit more information, you guys can buy individual bolts from Spec Bolt or buy the entire kit like I did for this bike. It's $240 for the nickel kit, or it's $199 for the zinc kit. The zinc kit is basically what you'd find an OEM bolt to be. These are what your OEM bolts are coated with, whereas the nickel is a step up. The nickel gives it that titanium works look without the titanium price tag. So that's cool. Looks like titanium, it's cheaper. So for only 40 bucks more, you get the nickel finish, which is way more rad in my opinion. So if you guys are interested in something like that, it might be worth looking into if you have an old restoration project like this. Well, this wasn't even a restoration project and I'm having problems, so I'm glad I got the kit. So the hole in the tank, that's just gonna have to sit for now. I'm in the mode of tearing this bike completely down to the frame. I can work on that tank bolt later. Can we hope for some better luck on this one here? Yes, dang. Even that bolt was a little corroded there. Had these shrouds off before too. That's why I'm so frustrated. We're gonna continue on with the rear of the bike and we're gonna strip that subframe off now. Dang, that bolt is nasty looking. Now flipping to the frame guard on the other side, there are two screw heads, but these are not Phillips heads. They're actually JIS screw heads. So I have a special screwdriver here from Prime MX that are made specifically for these Japanese screws. You do not want to use a Phillips head screwdriver on something like this because you will strip it out. I've made that mistake on this specific bike before, and that's why I bought these set of JIS screwdrivers from Prime. I'll link them in my description below. They fit bolt heads a million times better because they're actually made for the Japanese bolts. So there's sizes 1, 2, and 3. And then speaking of, here's the rear brake fluid reservoir. And this is what I'm talking about here. So I actually used on this top bolt a Phillips head screwdriver and not a JIS. And before I went any farther, you can see how the head's a little bit stripped. So I stopped, dropped, and rolled, grabbed the set from Prime, and then obviously this one is good to go. So there is a real live example of me messing up and then needing that JIS set. You can even knock it with a hammer on the back here to really get it in there. Now with a hammer, there we go. I'm actually gonna get this tank stripped off right now before I continue on with the subframe because the wiring harness kind of runs along the left side of the bike here from the front of the steering stem all the way back into the airbox. So if I can get this tank off first, then I'll have easier access to that wiring harness and see what's going on with it. Now that we have access to the entire wiring system, the most important thing that you can probably do is take a video of how the wiring currently sits on your bike, because if you have a memory like me, I probably shouldn't be talking bad about myself, I just never remember where things go. So we've got the regulator up front here, and that's gonna wire down to this little connector, but also connected to that. We've got the ignition coil, which is grounded right there, and it all runs down to the main wiring harness there, and then off of that ignition coil is your spark plug wire and cable, and then I've got my hour meter set up. And as you run down to the carburetor, you have the TPS sensor here that runs over to this side of the carb where the power jet is right here. So that is all connected through that connector right there. And then it runs back to the CDI box into the air box there. So we're gonna need to disconnect some of these connectors. Also take note of where the zip ties are and how the wires are kind of neatly wrapped around this frame area here to get them out of the way of the tank. Like I said, gotta be one of the most important things that I do when tearing down a bike, and I highly recommend doing that. Now the wiring harness should be completely free, so we can pull it through the frame once we get the subframe off. So if I calculated my math correctly, the subframe should disconnect from the carb, disconnect from the frame, and then I'll be able to scoot the wiring harness through the frame, past the shock, and then the regulator with the wiring harness can just come right off. Also interesting to note here too, where the ignition coil was, where they had the ground, you see how they sanded off the powder so the ground could connect right to the raw metal on the frame. If you guys are powder coating your frames, you definitely want to do that so the ground can connect to the raw metal. If you don't, your bike simply isn't probably going to start. So super important when you get the powder coated frame back to ground down to the raw metal here so the electrical system can be grounded properly. Okay, so with the bike at this point, I'm actually glad I remembered this because I always seem to forget this. I'm going to be completely rebuilding this engine along with the complete bike. So I think it's more annoying to drain the oil when you take the engine out of the bike and have it on the engine stand. So what I'm going to do with the bike in this status right now, I'm just going to take it off and put it on the triangle stand, pop off that engine drain bolt and get the oil drained real quick. That is why we're getting this frame powder coated. The rest of the frame seems pretty nice, right? Seems to be in great condition, but that underneath just is not gonna cut it. So that's why we need to powder coat this thing. With the oil drain now, what I'm gonna do is go ahead and take off the handlebars. And reason being, before going to take anything else off the rear of the bike, I'm gonna go ahead and crack the steering stem nut here. And the reason why I do that is because these nuts can sometimes be on here so hard, and if you wait till the complete rear end of the bike is off and you just have the frame, it's hard to get some leverage and lean up against something to get that nut cracked off. So with the swing arm and rear tire on, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get the handlebars off and then crack that nut. All right guys, so this is all I'm talking about here. I've got my breaker bar with my socket. I'm able to lean my leg up against that swing arm. So when I go ahead and loosen up that nut, I've got plenty of leverage on the breaker bar and with my leg that nut comes right off. So with that top triple clamp nut off, what I'm gonna do is actually not do anything else to the front end. That'll be the forks, the front wheel and forks will be the last thing I take off the bike. I'm gonna start working on the rear of the bike now. Before I take the rear wheel and chain sprockets off though, I'm gonna go ahead and take that front sprocket off. Reason being, this Kawasaki actually only has a C-clip, but if you have a bike that has a nut, like a Honda for example, or a Yamaha, you're gonna have to blast the nut off the front sprocket first. It's a lot easier to do that with the wheel and chain and sprockets on, because what you can do is slam your foot on the rear brake, lock that rear wheel up, and then you can blast that nut off with an impact or just a regular socket wrench. Next, let's tackle the rear brake system here. So if you guys notice here, this is not the OEM rear brake fluid reservoir. I got this from my guy Kenny Torian. He makes billet ones here, and obviously you can see that this one is all silver, but he does make ones that are anodized, especially in pro circuit colors. So I've got a brown body with a red cap. If you guys are interested in have one of these bikes and want to replace the dingy looking OEM one, I'll leave his contact information in my description below. So next up we've got these dog bones. before we go any further, with this bolt here on the top of the knuckle, I don't understand how the heck you're supposed to get a torque wrench in there to torque that nut down and that bolt down, because it's tight on both sides. So if you have any tips for me on how to tighten and torque that bolt and nut down, leave a comment below. I can actually get the swing arm off next to give me a little bit easier access to that nut and bolt. So with that swing arm off now, we'll be doing Pro X bearings throughout the entire bike, freshen this thing right up. And then with this thing here, I literally just tightened it down by feel when I tore this back end apart originally, so wasn't too bad. We got the bolt head on this side and the nut on this side for the bottom shock bolt here. You never want to loosen the bolt up with the bolt head. You always want to do it on the nut side. So I just got the 14mm holding this in place, and then I just crack it loose on the nut side here, because otherwise you're going to for sure strip the bolt head out if you try to loosen it by the bolt head. So if you are new to these bike builds, that's definitely the trick of the trade, and it'll save you headache down the road. And finally, the top shock bolt, and the shock will be free. I almost forgot with these Kawasaki's, these top shock bolts actually screw in and out. Rear end is off, guys, and at this point, the bike's getting a little bit wobbly on the stand. I should probably invest in one of those Rocky Mountain scissor stands, but here we are, doing it the old school method, tie down straps to the stand. Next up, we got this carb, which is going to be super simple. We'll just loosen up this carb boot here, and then the carb should just pop right off. But next up, we got the JSV pipe coming off. Now, this is not going anywhere. I'm not selling it. I'm keeping this in my collection. We're just gonna shelve it for a little while. We're gonna be putting the PK99250 Works Pro Circuit pipe on here for the video, photos, etc. But down the road, once that is all complete, I'm gonna be throwing the JSV pipe back on this bike. And we're gonna be doing a JSV versus the Pro Circuit Works pipe. If you guys don't know, I've already got the JSV versus the OEM pipe. And I also plan on doing the Pro Circuit Works pipe versus the OEM pipe. And with it being super hard to find pipes these days, if you guys have one of these older two-strokes, don't go by their website. You're gonna wanna shoot them an email and see if they can make a cone pipe for your bike. You can get it with the badge on, the badge off. And if you're not a fan of the cone look, they even make stamped pipes as well. So give those guys an email if you're interested in getting something from JSV. All right, let's get this clutch cable. One of the most annoying things for me to do on a motorcycle is take the cooling system off and putting it back on. No reason. Actually, probably the reason is because every time I go to drain the coolant, it just splashes everywhere in my face. So that's probably why I hate this task so much. We're gonna slice open this milk jug to catch it, and then we're gonna let it rip. Here we go. Oh yeah! Forgot we had some engine ice in there. I think that was probably the most successful so far coolant drain I've had. We just need to crack this cap, and then the geyser should start flowing. Yeah. Also, let's keep in mind this cooling system has never been taken off. This motor has never been taken out. This motor has never been unbolted, so I'm assuming these freaking things are gonna be pretty rock solid on there. There we go. Oh yeah, check that out. That is looking delicious in there. Same with the bottom there too. Next up, we got the engine hangers and two engine bolts, but before you take these off, snap a picture of which way the bolts are going. So it looks like they go from left to right side of the bike. Not sure how much of a difference that makes, but I always like to make sure I put them back the way the OEM put them on. Then we just lift up on the engine here, and those bolts should slide very easily out. And then the fun part is getting this beast out. Oh, there goes all the coolant. You know what? It was gonna come back to haunt me. That's how things were gonna work. So let's finish up the rest of the build. We pretty much got the front wheel here. Gonna strip the axle out. And then once I do this with the front wheel, there's gonna be too much weight on the frame and stand here, so the frame's gonna fall forward. So what we got here, we can use none other than the UFO Plast box. I'm normally a all green Kawasaki type of guy, but I also do love the all black shrouds, side panels, and rear fender look of the PC bikes with just the flow front green fender. The UFO plastics are aero specific to the PC team as well. Then we'll loosen up the triple clamp bolts, go ahead and then finally strip these forks out of the triple clamps. And then once we get this top clamp off, all you guys need to do is take a hammer and a little punch here and then knock that steering stem nut free, which will allow the triple clamps, the bottom triple clamp, to pop right out. And then we just got the frame. So there she is. I swear one day I'll be a little bit more organized in the way I freaking tear things down here with a motorcycle, but what better way than to start now? I've never done this. I've seen people do this all the time, and there's absolutely no rhyme or reason to the way I kind of configured things on here. I started out with just the frame and the motor, and I was like, oh, I'll put the front end stuff over there, but then we have the subframe and then the forks on the opposite sides. So obviously everything needs to be clean, stripped, powder coated. The swing arm's gonna be stripped. I got some special stuff coming for the suspension. Well, actually, I'm not even gonna use that OEM suspension. I've got the Pro Circuit stuff right over there. I've got the PC triple clamps and the bar mounts here. So there really is no time for me to waste on this build. I don't wanna spend a bunch of time building this thing for the entire summer. I wanna be riding this bike this summer. So I'm putting about 2-month timeline on the build. We're gonna see how well I stick to that plan. I still gotta strip the motor apart. That thing's gonna be completely rebuilt. The suspension's gonna be completely torn down. It needs to be sent somewhere to another country, perhaps, and then sent over to Pro Circuit for them to work their magic. The wheels, I've got another set of hubs coming, and W is gonna be doing something cool for those. There's just a lot of things. I'm gonna get some vapor blasting done. Unfortunately, I don't have my own vapor blaster anymore, so I'm going to be outsourcing that to my buddy Tyler. I'm just excited to see where this project goes. I hope you guys are excited and want to come along the journey with me. And I can't forget Rocky Mountain ATV MC. If you guys are familiar with my channel, they are a huge supporter. I've got an affiliate link in my description below. If and when you guys purchase parts by clicking through that link and shopping through that link first, it directly supports me when you guys do that, and it helps me pump out these videos. So it doesn't cost anything to you. You guys won't notice anything different on your end. I greatly appreciate it. I see you guys doing that, so thank you so much for that. And like I mentioned earlier, we're gonna have some highlight videos on David Pingree Whiskey Throttle YouTube channel, and he's gonna be testing the bike at the end of the project. So if you guys can't get enough of my build videos, I'm gonna be creating the highlight videos for his channel, so you guys can go along and check out that as well. But we're gonna wrap this thing up. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for part 2 of the build series, because we're gonna be going into a little bit more depth about what we're doing with these parts and the engine, its suspension, etc. But as always, guys, ride hard, be safe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.